malami Professor Sani Umar Fage saboda lokaci da ya dauka da kuma irin bayanin da yi, kuma alhamdulillah dama amfanin a ce tattaunawa to bayan an sa da tambaya za a iya kawo shawara, wanda shawara ita ma za ta iya bada wata kafa na abin da za a duba. A wannan bigiren ne nake cewa muna ƙara godiya ga manyan baki da suka halarci wannan wuri, musamman mai girma ga ladiman hadeja Alhaji Usman Abdulaziz, ga ɗan kwamitin amintattu daga jihar Lagos na wannan kungiya Prince Suleiman Olagunju, kuna ƙara godiya. Chairman wato shugaba na wannan zama Professor Abubakar, muna ƙara godiya. Kuma da wannan nake cewa kamar yadda aka faɗa za a je a yi sallah minti 15 za a dawo. Muna fatan za a saurari makala da za a faɗa, za a gabatar ta gaba, wanda ita ce ta Professor Salisu Shehu, wato mataimakin shugaban jami'ar a Istiqama, wanda kuma kwanan aka bashi aiki na babban sakatare na hukumar a bincike da inganta al'amura na ilimi na ƙasa. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wassalamu
The Chairman, Zakat and Waqf Commission, Gombe State. You are welcome. The Chairman, AZAWON, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to stand before you for the second session of paper presentation on this all-important conference, the fourth of its kind, holding in Hadeja, Jigawa State. Without missing words, I would like to invite or to introduce the chairman of this occasion, who in turn will pilot the session, Dr. Abdullahi Abubakar Lamido. Sorry, Dr. Abubakar Lamido is the speaker, and Alan Shai is the chairman of the occasion.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me once again welcome back to another section which I believe is also going to be very resourceful and insightful, and of course it's going to also be very educative with regards to the topic that will be taken by our brother Dr. Abdullahi Abubakar Lamido, who is the chairman of the Zakat and Waqf Foundation of Gombe State. And the topic to be discussed by him and your esteemed participants is to look at the role of the Islamic social welfare system. And I believe he is up to the task. He will look at the concepts, he will look at the dimensions, he will also look at the importance or the significance of the role the system is expected to play in our lives, in our community. And of course, we also want to look at, the success factors, because Islam is not a theory. Islam is both theory and practical. So it is in this light that I will invite him to have this discourse with us, spend between 50, maximum 60 minutes with us, and then he will rest his case. And we also want to invite our esteemed participants for their comments, their questions, and then again the mic will be taken back to him to further expatiate. And as usual, the distinguished personalities seated by my both sides. If also they have what they want to contribute, we also avail them the opportunity to also share their own valuable insight into the discourse. It is in this light I would like to invite Dr. Abdullahi Abubakar Lamido to have the floor. Thank you very much.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات وبفضله تتنزل الخيرات والبركات وبتوفيقه تتحقق المقاصد والغايات. وأصلي وأسلم على أسعد النبيين وأشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد, my brothers and sisters in Islam, and particularly the distinguished personalities on the high table and the magnanimous people of Hadejia in Jigawa State, and the entire people of Jigawa State, and of course all participants at the 4th AZAWON National Conference. I salute you with the best salutations of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I stand here to speak on behalf of my mentor general, Professor Salisu Shehu, who consistently and continuously has been mentoring me directly for the past 34 years. Last about 2 to 3 weeks he called me. That was when he was the Vice Chancellor of Al-Istiqamah University before he became the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Educational Research and Development Council, informing me that I was to represent him. I said, sir, I can come and talk on your behalf, but I cannot represent you in that regard. And he gave me a blank check to talk on the topic the way I feel I can say something about. Of course, I have learned a lot on this topic from him and read a lot from him. Allah, you will see the influences of Professor Salisu Shehu in the presentation. The topic I'm going to address is the Islamic social welfare system, dimensions of social welfare, and then the Islamic social welfare system, and then talk about the centrality of social welfare in Islam, particularly from the Quran and also from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then I will talk about the objectives of the Islamic social welfare system and then the features of the Islamic social welfare system. And I will, inshallah, toward the end, talk about some success factors in entrenching and institutionalizing an effective and robust Islamic social welfare system in Nigeria, inshallah. In economy, every economy, especially from the Islamic point of view, is comprised of 3 important sectors. We usually talk about PPP, public-private partnership. But in Islamic economics, we emphasize PPPP, public, private, and philanthropic partnership. Because much as the public sector is important and the private sector is important, so also is the philanthropic sector. So the public governmental sector, the private and the philanthropic sector are what make the Islamic economic architecture. And the philanthropic sector, of course, is also called the third sector, or the voluntary sector, or charitable sector. The public sector represents the general interest of the public by providing essential services and regulations, and also creating an enabling environment for all members of the society to pursue their legitimate individual and collective interests. It has a broad rich and regulatory power over all other sectors, of course, and has access to public resources. The private sector, on the other hand, comprises of that part of the economy that is owned, controlled, and managed by the private individuals and enterprises. The activities in the private sector are motivated by profit and are characterized by competition. And so we have the public sector, which is of course governmental, and then the private sector, which is driven by competition largely. The philanthropic sector, which we're going to talk about inshallah, which is known also as the third sector or non-profit sector, is made up of organizations and individuals who donate their resources, their talent, their time, their money for charitable purposes. The main focus here is to address socio-economic needs of societal members through non-governmental interventions. It is essentially the third philanthropic sector that today makes what we call social finance sector, as it is concerned with addressing the social well-being of those who have deficit of resources and cannot afford from their earnings to satisfy their needs, basic needs and beyond. Although the public sector also provides for the social needs of the people, but the third philanthropic sector has social welfare as its primary essence. So the essence of the third sector, or what is called the social finance or non-profit sector, is essentially about providing social welfare, improving the well-being of the people through charitable and philanthropic interventions. Now, when we talk of social welfare, what does social welfare mean as a key concept in the topic of discussion today? Social welfare refers to the organized public or private social services provided to assist disadvantaged groups. It encompasses a wide range of programs, policies, and services that are aimed at promoting the well-being of individuals and families. These services may include financial assistance, healthcare, housing, education, and social support, among other, many things that are related to it. I have got some definitions given by some authorities, but I think it's not time for discussing definitions. But one important thing is that when we talk of social welfare, we are referring to services provided by sometimes the government itself, because the government also provides social welfare services, or more importantly, private organizations, non-profit organizations, to help the poor, the ill, and those who are less privileged in the society. So, talking about social welfare, of course, it can have two levels. There is the non-organized system where people, in an informal way, give support to other members of the society. But when we talk of Islamic social welfare system here, we are actually talking about social welfare from the perspective of organized philanthropy, from the perspective of institutionalized way of providing social welfare service. And that's why I have taken one important explanation of this concept, which says it is the organized system of social services and institutions designed to aid individuals and groups to attain satisfying standards of life and health and personal and social relationships, which permit them to develop their full capacity. So it's about supporting people not only to alleviate and reduce their own problems, but to actually empower them to be able to take advantage of all the risks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. So when we talk about social welfare in this regard, we're talking about how do we look at those, at the lower level of the socio-economic ladder to help them to discover their potentials and be able to use those potentials to improve their own life so that in all aspects of their own life they will be better. So how do they discover what Professor Amati is saying will call their capabilities? Their capability to function and participate in society, not only to solve their own problems, but also to contribute to the development and betterment of the society. So it's about developing their full capacities to promote their well-being in harmony with the needs of their families and the needs of their community. And from an Islamic point of view, when we talk of Islamic social welfare, because this I've talked about it in general perspective, as part of the comprehensiveness of Islam, we know Islam to be a comprehensive religion that has provisions for every aspect of human life. وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And the Quran has provisions for everything, whether in a direct, specific address, from the Quran and Sunnah, or at least from its own generic, and holistic principles which can be employed to address specific issues in different aspects of life. So as part of this comprehensiveness of Islam, Islam has provided us with a holistic system of social welfare. This system is a divinely ordained system aimed at achieving societal justice, equity, and inclusiveness. The uniqueness of the Islamic social welfare system lies in the fact that it approaches social welfare from a holistic point of view, encompassing spiritual, social, and material well-being, economic well-being, and well-being in all aspects of life, intellectual and so on. And that's why when we look at the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, we see them using some terminologies. In fact, the Quran and Sunnah are replete with these terminologies that are, related directly to the question of social welfare. For example, you see terms like, scholars of Islam, especially today, talked about, terms like al-amal al-khayri, al-amal al-ighathi. All these are terms. Al-amal al-khayri, charitable work. Al-amal al-ighathi, humanitarian or relief work, and so on. All these refer to the organized way Islam has provided for supporting this society and ensuring their social well-being and social welfare. So, so we see that the well-developed concepts of social solidarity in Islam also, at-takaful al-ijtimai. You see how scholars of Islam, from yesteryears to date, scholars of Islam have always talked about this concept of at-takaful al-ijtimai, social solidarity. We see also in the Quran and Sunnah and the discourse of Muslim jurists, extensive discussion about the concept of cooperation in doing good, at-ta'awun, wa ta'awanu 'ala al-birri wat-taqwa, wa la ta'awanu 'ala al-ithmi wal-udwan. All these were developed from the holistic Quranic principles related to the promotion of social welfare. That's why Sheikh Yusuf al-Qardawi, when he talks about al-amal al-khayri fil Islam, that is Islamic charitable work, he defines it, and I like this definition. He says, because it's a very comprehensive one for me. He says, al-amal al-khayri huwa al-naf'u al-maddi al-ma'nawi aw al-ma'nawi الذي يقدمه الإنسان لغيره من دون أن يأخذ عليه مقابلا ماديا ولكن ليحقق هدفا خاصا له أكبر من المقابل المادي قد يكون عند بعض الناس الحصول على الثناء والشهرة أو نحو ذلك من أغراض الدنيا. He says charitable work involves providing material or moral benefits to others without seeking a direct material compensation, but rather to achieve a specific goal greater than the material reward. For some, not for Muslims, this goal might be to gain praise, fame, or other worldly benefits. But for a Muslim, the goal is to serve humanity, support humanity, and achieve Allah's pleasure. So we can see the Islamic social welfare system talks about, al-amal al-khayri in general, talks about, trying to work towards making life better for others with the intent of achieving reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's look at the centrality of social welfare in Islam also. I remember when about not less than about 20 years back, when Professor Salih Sushew wrote a paper, Islamic Social Welfare System. And I was reading, and I always remember how he was able to, expound a very strong framework developed by Islam from Quranic and Sunnatic point of view. And he talks about the fact that social welfare is central to Islamic belief, worship, and socio-political system. So in Islam, when we talk about helping others, supporting others, you are talking about something that has some connection to the belief of Muslims. At least if you look at the Quran, you see in many places wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the righteous, He will say part of their features is they give to the needy from what Allah has given them. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. And you continue to see this. Wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the righteous, part of their own, features is, engaging in supporting others and providing them for the better their well-being, social well-being. And that's why when Allah talks about al-abrar in the Quran, you see they give. In al-abrar, يَشْرَبُونَ مِنْ كَأْسٍ كَانَ مِزَاجُهَا كَافُورًا عَيْنًا يَشْرَبُ بِهَا عِبَادُ اللَّهِ يُفَجِّرُونَها تَفْجِيرًا يُوفُونَ to the place where Allah says وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And that's what we will continue to see in the Quran. A second important thing about the centrality of this in the Quran and Sunnah of Islam is that the issue of social welfare has been made part and parcel of the pillars of Islam. At least you have to believe in the obligation of zakat, which has to do with the Islamic social welfare system. And one very important point we need to underline is the fact that as a Muslim you are required to believe in zakat. That means as a Muslim, every Muslim has to always remind himself about the importance of zakat. And therefore, just as you remind yourself about other pillars of Islam, and just as you strive to practicalize salah and practicalize saum, to practicalize hajj, so also should you strive and plan towards becoming a zakat giver. And that's the essence, that's one of the implications of you believing in the obligation of zakat. So Islam wants that more Muslims should give zakat than those who will collect zakat. In other words, in Islam, we want to have more zakat givers than zakat receivers. And since you believe in the obligation of zakat, then you are expected to work hard towards earning enough resources, sufficient enough to make you a zakat payer. Social welfare is also a cardinal objective of the Sharia. Scholars of Islam, like Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, will mention that the issue of social welfare and working towards establishing social welfare of people and amal al-khayr is part and parcel of the objectives of the Sharia of Islam. And it's a key feature of the Islamic social, economic, and political system, as I've said. And it's a distinctive feature of the Islamic civilization. I remember some of us who have read this book by Dr. Mustafa Stibai, Min Rawa'i Hadaratina. It has been translated into English. some glittering aspect of the Islamic civilization. And he talks about this aspect of one of the unique features of the Islamic civilization is the emphasis it has given to the issue of social welfare, and especially through zakat and the institution of waqf. So it's part of what makes our civilization unique and distinctive. And then, importantly, as reiterated by Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi in his book, Fiqh al-Zakat, that Islam is the first civilization to raise an army to go and fight to fight in the defense of the right of the poor. In other words, Islam is the first civilization under Sayyidina Abubakar radiallahu anhu that raised an army to go and fight with some people who say they will not give the poor their due, zakat. And this is the centrality of the issue of social welfare in Islam. And then, as Professor Salih Sushew says in that his writing on Islamic social welfare, he says, if you look at the Quran, you will see that the issue of social welfare is a central theme in the Quran and Sunnah. Wherever you go in the Quran, wherever you look, you read the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you see emphasis on the question of promoting social welfare. Let's look at what the Quran has said, and without even going deeper into it. At least we know that the Quran has talked about the issue of kindness, charity, compassion, mercy, care about others, concern about others, and so on and so forth, and giving and spending in the cause of Allah and spending for the betterment of the poor and the needy. The Quran employs several terms to describe various forms of benevolent acts which have direct bearing on promoting social welfare or social well-being. The Quran, for example, uses the term rahmah, khair, ihsan. How many verses of the Quran can you remember that talk about khair? That talk about al-ihsan. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-'adli wal-ihsani. Inna Allah yuhibbu alladhina taqaw walladhina hum muhsinuna. And so on and so forth. You see how the Quran emphasizes alladhina ahsanu al-husna wa ziyada. Man ja'a bil-hasanati falahu 'ashru amthaliha. And so on and so forth about ihsan. And then sadaqah. And birr. It'am. The Quran talks about infaq, but it also talks about it'am. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا. And interestingly, the Quran praises those who do it'am, and when he says وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, and then the Quran blames those who don't do feed the poor. And it also blames those who do not encourage others to feed the poor. The Quran mentions zakah in 32 places, 32 times, often in conjunction with salah. At least in 28 places it was mentioned together with salah. The Quran talks about ihsan, doing good to others, 191 times. It talks about khair, goodness, in 148 times. And in fact, and its derivatives have been mentioned 167 times. This frequent emphasis on charitable giving and social welfare underscores the importance of these practices in the Islamic teachings and the Islamic tradition. In fact, aside from Tawheed, and this has been emphasized by many scholars, including Professor Salih Sushew himself in many places, that aside from Tawheed, no other pillar of Islam is referenced as frequently as spending in charity in the Quran. The Quran has made more reference to spending, and in fact, than making reference to Salah, to Hajj, to Sawm. This is to show you how important it is, in addition to the fact that Zakah, which has to do with obligatory spending, is a part of the pillars of Islam. But Islam, the Quran makes references to this. At least we have seen, in most of the places where Zakah is mentioned, it is together with Salah. But in some places, Zakah is mentioned alone. But then talk about verses that talk about that refer to the question of al-infaq. In fact, الذين ينفقون مثل الذين ينفقون ما لكم لا تنفقون وأنفقوا في سبيل الله يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا. You see verses of the Quran talking about an infaq. So the Quran makes more references to infaq than other pillars of Islam. Not because the others are less important, but at least to show you how significant this is. Because in the house of Islam, every aspect of Islam requires wealth. And that's why, zakah is about wealth, in fact with surplus. Sawm has connection with wealth. Because now I'm saying in Hajj you see man istata'a ilayhi sabila, it requires wealth. In Zakah it's surplus wealth, not just having wealth. That you have surplus that you have kept for 1 year without even using. So Islam encourages you to earn enough that you can save and do Zakah. In Sawm, yes, you can do 30 Sawms a day by doing your own and feeding 29 fasting people, and you get it with wealth, and so on and so forth. This is centrality of wealth in Islam, and that's why reference is made in the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ about this. The Quran directly commands and motivates all charitable deeds, while also forbidding their opposites. The Quran praises those who engage in charitable acts and blames and often even condemns those who neglect giving. الذين ينفقون الذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم وويل للمشركين الذين لا يؤتون الزكاة. So you can see how the Quran actually condemns those who refuse to do, especially the obligatory charitable acts. It extols both the act of doing good and the character of the doer. The Quran also praises those who advocate for charity, cooperate in its practice, and strive for excellence in it. So you can see, for example, when the Quran uses the term khair, the Quran and the Sunnah, calls upon fi'lul khair. وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. It talks about قول الخير وقولوا للناس حسنا وإن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. You see, the Quran also talks about thinking about khair, competing about wastabiqul khairat, competing in doing that. And then the Quran also talks about cooperating in doing khair. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. As we say, al-birr, al-khair, al-ihsan, all refer to, acts of doing good. In essence, the Quran comprehensively addresses what I will call the 7 W's of charitable giving and social welfare. What are they? What to give, why to give, how to give, when to give, where to give, who should give, and for whom to give. And if you look at the Quran and the Sunnah, you see all of them. For example, what to give is your wealth. From what Allah has given you. If you look at why to give, of course it's better for the benefit of the poor and to gain reward in the hereafter. The Quran has mentioned that several places. How to give? إن تبدوا الصدقات فنعمها وإن تخفوها وتؤتوها الفقراء فهو خير لكم. If you look at when to give, وآتوا حقه يوم حصاده, whenever there is need, also, and the Quran will tell you where to give, of course, who to give, who should give, those who have it. تؤخذ من أغنيائهم وترد على فقرائهم. The Quran also says that وآتوهم من مال الله الذي آتاكم. Who should I give? When the companions came and asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to whom should we give our sadaqah? يسألونك ماذا ينفقون قل ما أنفقتم من خير فللوالدين. You see, من خير من مال فللوالدين والأقربين واليتامى والمساكين to the end. So the Quran actually addresses every question about the issue of social welfare, giving and so on. Now the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam descended. You get Sunnah Qawliya, Sunnah Fi'liya, and Sunnah Taqreeriya. There is no time to explain this widely because of the time we have. But at least we have seen how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam exemplified the issue of giving. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, كان أجود الناس وكان أجود ما يكون في Ramadan, as one of his wives said. But there is one hadith that I would want us to ponder over. A hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, reported by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, "Ala kulli muslimin sadaqa." Upon every believer, oh mashallah, upon every believer there is a sadaqah. In other words, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, there is a charity that every believer has to do. In other words, the issue of social welfare, everybody has a role, according to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then they asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, "Ara'ayta in lam yajid?" What if someone doesn't have what to give? قال يعمل بيده فينفع نفسه ويتصدق. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, if you don't have what to give in charity, then you go and work hard, earn something, take care of yourself, and then take part of it and give in charity. In other words, you have no excuse. Go and look for money to give in charity after solving your own problem. أَرَأَيْتَ إِن لَّمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. What if the person doesn't have the capacity to go and earn and have surplus that he can give in charity? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, okay, يُعِينُ ذَا الْحَاجَةِ الْمَلْهُوفِ. Then he should look for someone who is in need and distressed. Someone who is in need or is distressed, then help him. Someone that sometimes probably is confused about something in life and he needs someone to advise him. And that single piece of advice can take him out of his own difficulty. Advise him. A person who somebody unjustifiably, for example, has led him to imprisonment because he is charged of an offense he has not done. And you are a lawyer, you don't have the money to give him. Or you have a friend who is a lawyer who can go and stand in for him. You can talk to him. That is also sadaqah. Dal hajat al-malhuf. And the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also asked again, Ara'ayta illam yastati'. What if one doesn't have that capacity, ability to also do this? He has no means of doing that. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then says, Ya'muru bil ma'ruf aw al khayr. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, then you should go and command good. At least in your own area there is someone you can encourage. Even if he is somebody who prays, you can remind him of the importance of praying in time. If he prays and goes to the masjid and he doesn't go with his children, you can remind him of the importance of encouraging his children to go for salah. مُرُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ بِالصَّلَاةِ بِسَبْعٍ وَاضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا بِعَشْرٍ. So you can remind him of this. Someone who doesn't give charity and he has the capacity, you encourage him to give that, to give charity. Al-amru bil ma'ruf. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that one is also sadaqah. Ara'ayta, then they ask also, illam yaf'al. What if he has not been able to do that? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, yumsiku 'ani sharri fa innaha sadaqah. He should restrain himself from doing evil, from harming others. That itself is sadaqah. In other words, this the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam shows us how all-encompassing, the concept of sadaqah or social work in general or social welfare is in Islam. So these hadiths actually draws our attention to the central importance of charity in Islam, emphasizing and outlining the various ways it can be fulfilled. It outlines the hierarchy of charitable actions to be undertaken by a Muslim in fulfilling the Sharia requirement of making charity. It gives a 5-level hierarchical order through which every Muslim has to, at any time, be engaged in one charitable activity or another, in one activity of promoting social welfare or another. The first one is direct charity, where the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ala kulli muslimin sadaqah." And the second is earning a living and making in order to help self and help others. The third is helping others and assisting those who are struggling or in difficult situations. And the fourth is encouraging good deeds and through promoting what is right and good in society. And finally, if we cannot do that, at least avoiding evil, refraining from harmful actions and harmful speech. The hadith demonstrates that promoting the welfare of others is a multifaceted endeavor. That it has so many dimensions, accessible to individuals of all capacities. Everybody has something to do in promoting social welfare. It reveals the breadth of the Islamic social welfare system, emphasizing that welfare can be promoted not only through material support, but also through non-material means, such as removing harm and instilling happiness in the minds of others. Remember how the Prophet ﷺ shows us that at least, meeting your brother or sister with a smiling face is sadaqah. وَلَوْ أَن تَلْقَى أَخَاكَ بِوَجْهٍ طَلِقٍ. Even that one, at least, is something that at all times you can do. Now, what are the key components of the Islamic social welfare system? Scholars have talked about zakah, and zakah is so central in Islam. The fact that Islam has made it a pillar of its pillar, then that shows you zakah is on top of all others, from especially the spiritual and Quranic point of view. Zakah is ahead of everyone because it is an obligation. The second is sadaqah, that is voluntary charity, non-compulsory charity. This is given beyond the obligatory charity to support social causes and charitable activities. And it is done through monetary donations, through in-kind donations, because sometimes you may have something to give in kind, not in cash, that might at a time be more useful to the beneficiary than probably giving them money. And this is very important also. Sometimes what you need to do is to look at your wardrobe and look at those kayaki that you have not been using, or even those you used, and say, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And you take from libas also, عَلَى حُبِّهِ, the one you love, and give to others. مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. Sometimes what you need to do is when you cook your food, you apply the formula that every day, in addition to the 7 plates for the 7 people in your family, you have 2 additional plates or 7 additional plates, or at least from them you can create 2 or 3 that will be given in charity. Remembering the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, "Ta'amul wahid yakfil ithnayn." The food of one can satisfy 2. So if every day you should have that separate. Don't wait until you have undergone the remaining. That is a waste. And give no. يُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شَكُورًا. So it can be in form of acts of kindness and or services. Some people don't have money. They don't have knowledge and skills. But when it comes to labor, they can do. So in our own Islamic work, it has several levels. And we need to always remember this. Oh, subhanAllah. I saw 30 and I have just seen 15. Then there is waqf, that I'm sure a discussion on waqf will come. But it's very important that we dwell into the discussion about waqf and popularize it in our society so that people will understand its own concept, its own principles, its own application, and all dimensions of its socio-economic contribution to the development of the society. Then there is qardul hasan, which is benevolent loan, which is an interest-free loan provided to those in need, especially those to support them to get out of poverty and empower them. It's also one of the more important dimensions of Islamic social welfare provisions. Then there is takaful, which is called Islamic insurance. Though generally, takaful ijtima'i is a wide, concept or even institution. But at least today, the word takaful has become, used in the Islamic insurance context. It's another very important dimension. Then one thing we usually forget in our discussion of Islamic social finance are Islamic cooperative societies. Islamic cooperative societies fit in our own discussions of Islamic social finance. And I have not seen emphasis on this in the discuss about social finance, because this is based on the Islamic principle of ta'awun, based on the Islamic principle of takaful, where people come together and mobilize their own savings in order to support each other, get out of poverty, and empower themselves through owning assets, starting businesses, financing education, financing health, and other important aspects of their own societal development. And then community-based initiatives, local community organizations that provide social services and support to their members based on ta'awun al-birri wal taqwa. What are the objectives and socio-economic significance of the Islamic social welfare system? One is poverty alleviation, and I'm sure we all know this. Then the question of socio-economic justice, trying to create a balance. كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. Then community development, and then empowering individuals and families. In the Islamic economic system, there is always emphasis on the family. And that's why even in the objectives of the Sharia, the question of protecting family or progeny is very, very significant. So Islam has emphasis on the institution of family. And then moral and spiritual development. We talk about moral development, not only material development. And then comprehensive, sustainable development. I've tried to identify and to enlist, based on what I have read and what I have seen from the experiences we have in the Zakat al-Waqf Foundation and other Islamic organizations. At least I've identified 13 important features of the Islamic social welfare system. One of them, I've talked about the comprehensiveness, covering all aspects of needs, spiritual, economic, social, intellectual, cultural, and so on, in line with the Maqasid al-Sharia. So when you come to design social welfare interventions, you have to put this into consideration. Don't give people money and say, go and empower yourself, without attaching it with some social and spiritual training, so that they will know that wealth belongs to Allah. Min malillahi alladhi atakum. And that the essence of wealth is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الرِّزْقُ مَالٌ لِإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ. As the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will say, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then the issue of impact. Impact. The systems will have a tangible and measurable positive impact on the lives of the beneficiaries. And then the question of sustainability. This is very important. Try to have things that are sustainable. And that's why the concept of wakaf is very important, because it's the Islamic institution of economic sustainability. Inclusivity. The systems will cater to the needs of all eligible beneficiaries. We have so many people that need our own interventions. Let's develop ways through which all of them can benefit. Sometimes the beneficiaries do not necessarily need your money. What they need is to encourage them, to motivate them, to show them that they can get themselves out of poverty, to give them confidence to know that there are opportunities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided abundant resources. جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ ذَلُولًا فَامْشُوا فِي مَنَاكِبِهَا وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ وَإِلَيْهِ النُّشُورُ. Show them that Allah has not created them to live in poverty. Allah has created them to enjoy the life of this world within the context of the teachings of the Sharia. And everything on earth belongs to them, not to others. Allah has said it in the Quran. Since they are believers, the whole wealth of this world belongs to them. قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَالطَّيِّبَاتِ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ قُلْ هِيَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا خَالِصَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. What they need is that courage, motivation to feel that, look, as Muslims, we live with izzah. وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Begging, living in poverty is not izzah, because Islam doesn't want it for us. Scalability. Do something that can be scaled. Try it. If it works, expand it so that it can benefit more people. Then replicability. Come up with things that others can copy, and others, reliability, proactivity, priority, accountability, empowerment, innovation, partnership, and so on. So, permit me to, in 2 minutes, inshallah, talk about or 30 or 20. 2 minutes, inshallah, briefly talk about some critical success factors for entrenching and institutionalizing a robust Islamic social welfare system. One aspect is having a strong regulatory framework. And then effective oversight. We need to have regulatory body to monitor and enforce compliance with regulations. This might not necessarily be something we must do today, but it should be part of the things we should be working towards. Transparency and accountability. The second dimension is robust institutional capacity. From my experience, many of our Islamic social welfare organizations, the kind of bodies that we have, and of course most of the Islamic organizations that we have, our major challenge is connected to institutional incapacity, or rather weak institutional capacity. So we need professionalization of our work. We need to recruit and train qualified professionals to manage zakah and work of institutions. We should make it an institution where people can apply and follow rigorous criteria for employment in it, so that we'll have standard ways of doing our activities. Capacity building, ongoing training and development, technology adoption. This is the second aspect. The third is public awareness and education. We need to make a lot of noise about the importance of zakah and wakaf and sadaqah. We need to educate people about how they work and what is in them for them. What is in zakah and wakaf for them. We need awareness campaigns. Educational and religious education should also emphasize that in our ta'limat. We talk about many things, but we don't talk about waqf. We don't talk about zakah, and in a way that people can feel we are talking to them. We need media outreach. Every day we talk on the media. Then fourth, effective governance and management, and then which include good governance practices, financial management, risk management, and so on, and then collaboration and partnerships, which requires partnership with government where necessary, but especially among organizations. You have one organization in Kaduna, you have another in Gombe or Maiduguri. How can we work together? Some of us have specialized in mobilization. Some have expertise in wakaf and zakah education. Some have, they have been able to develop very effective intervention frameworks and models. How can we work together? I have mobilized 2 million, 5, 10, 20, 200 million, but I don't know how to use it effectively in intervention. Let me look for others to train me, or at least others who have effective ways of disbursement. And we'll work together and see how we can promote this very important thing. I'll conclude with a statement from Imam al-Ghazali as my last thing. Imam al-Ghazali says, of course, there is the issue of international cooperation, but I think we will talk about it later. Imam al-Ghazali says, it is obligatory upon the wealthy to stand firm in fulfilling the needs of the poor. And it is imperative for the authorities to compel them to do so if the wealth from zakah is insufficient to meet all their needs. The wealthy must provide the poor with food, clothing suitable for both hot and cold weather, and housing that protects them from the sun, rain, and the gaze of passers-by. In other words, it's a collective obligation to take care of the needs of those who don't have access to resources. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. And I sincerely apologize to the chairman for exceeding the 2 minutes.